So after having seen this car in a static display in a studio, we are now going to take this car out on the track to test out a couple of things, primarily being the active safety features as well as this car's dynamic capabilities. Okay, so first up, we are going to do a 0 to 100 test. Now for this, Proton has supplied a Proto to our left, and of course the Saga that we're driving is powered by the new IGT powertrain. Now this is a really simple 0 to 100 test, straight down, just to see the response of the CVT automatic gearbox as well as to see the response of this engine. Now there is a sport mode, but I'm just going to use drive first in order to see how quickly this car responds on a more natural setting. So we are good to go. Good, great, okay. 2, 1.
Go.
Okay, there is a slight delay to the throttle response, but it does seem to pick up pretty much all right. So and now as we come off the throttle, I can say that the throttle response is a little bit delayed immediately off the line, but the CVT does seem to pick up eventually, and as we've heard earlier, there's also the lane departure warning coming on. So with the new Saga, there are some updates primarily to the powertrain, but also in terms of safety, and so it is very interesting for us to experience, for example, how these systems work, and more importantly that, wow, that's very aggressive, but more importantly, the CVT response is not quite what we would have liked to have seen from this car, but overall I think that given what it is and given the price point, etc., I still think this is an improvement over the outgoing vehicle. So that was a demonstration of this car's front departure alert, and one of the many systems that have been added to the new Saga as a result of that monocular camera system. Now, among the other features that this car now offers includes things like autonomous emergency braking as well as forward collision warning, which is something that I think we're about to have a demonstration of now. Now, the Proton Saga has long lagged behind the Proto in terms of active safety, but that is certainly something that they intend to fix with this. So for example, we just sampled the rear collision warning as well as now the lane change assist, where there is a vehicle in my blind spot monitoring is going off, and of course there is a warning sound to go along with it. These are all welcome changes and welcome additions to the Saga, especially given the fact that this is ultimately meant to be the most widely available vehicle for Malaysians, the most affordable vehicle for a lot of Malaysians, and so the integration of these features certainly sees an upgrade of the Proton Saga to levels that we'd expect to see from a vehicle in 2025. So what is quite clear is the fact that the execution of these systems clearly shows the sort of polish that Proton has applied to these systems. This is obviously not the first time we've used this. Of course, it's the first application into the Saga. And so the implementation of these systems, for example, does not feel like a first attempt. Instead, like I said, there is a certain degree of polish here, which is what we'd expect to see from Proton, especially given the amount of time that's gone into these cars, especially in terms of R&D. Now, the test track here in Tanjung Malim is a little bit different from what we're used to in Shah Alam, which means that the speeds are also a little bit more reasonable. But overall, as far as I can tell, it is still relatively impressive. And it bodes well to show that this car should be at least equally impressive once we actually take it out onto the open road. So now we're going to give this car a little bit of a dynamic test. So what we're going to go through is a little bit of a slalom, which is not going to be that fast. I think a maximum of about 45 to 50 kilometers an hour. And that should give us an understanding of how the new Saga ought to react in what we'll call emergency situations. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the new Saga is built off of the AMA platform, which is an evolution of the existing vehicle, which means that it's starting off pretty strong. The bones of this car should be relatively impressive. And so we are expecting big things once we hit the dynamic course. So if we're clear to go, yes? All right.
Yep.
Now, the Saga that we're driving is the flagship model, which means that this 1.5 litre engine is paired to a CVT automatic gearbox, the origins of which we cannot quite determine despite us asking them many, many times. Now, in the 0 to 100 test, we did notice the fact that there is a little bit of a laggard response to the throttle upon immediate input, but because it is a CVT, it does mean that eventually the engine speed does match up, and then eventually the car will pick up and go, which does pretty well against vehicles like the Pro2 Beza, which was the benchmark vehicle that Proton has provided for us here on the track. But now, ultimately, we need to see how the Saga can manage in terms of a dynamic test. The Saga has always been relatively impressive in terms of the way it drives, and so now we're here to see if the new car is just as impressive as it's ever been. So, going through these corners, it is quite clear that the new Saga does seem to feel relatively balanced, and even with slightly more ham-footed inputs, the car does seem to respond decently well. These tires are also prone to torture, but then again, for a vehicle at this price point, for a vehicle within this segment, I think this is still relatively impressive nonetheless. More importantly, even in drive, the throttle does seem to respond fast enough to inputs that it feels very natural and very tractable, and again, this car does seem to drive very predictably. Even as we take the speeds a little bit faster than I should, and I know that I am attracting ire from the instructor to my left, it's quite clear that this car maintains a very neutral driving profile, which is exactly what you want from a vehicle like this. And the body control is actually not that bad, despite no compromise in terms of overall comfort. This is not bad, genuinely not that bad. Of course, this car would benefit hugely from a better set of tires, but overall, this is still pretty much all right. Not bad for the new Saga. Genuinely, not bad. So after having sampled this car on the test track here in Tanjung Malim, a few things are quite clear. Firstly, this is a vastly improved vehicle over the Saga that it replaces, but more importantly, it raises a few more questions with regards to what this car's real-world performance is like, for which we'll just have to wait and see. In any case, that concludes our dynamic preview of the new Proton Saga. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to be notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and if you hit the link in the description below, you can join our new WhatsApp channel so that you remain up to date with the very latest developments in the Malaysian automotive industry. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care and stay safe.